Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to the third episode of Season 14 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown, and this is the only weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. So before we dive into social media, I wanted to check off a couple of things. So first up, our weekly look at Jake Thistle's journey on American Idol. Most of you will know by now that Jake made it through to the Golden Room and then on to the final 30. So not being a regular viewer of the show, I assume this means he's now in the process that, eliminates sort of the regular show that eliminates contestants, over the coming weeks through public voting and judge voting and that kind of thing. So one thing I did notice, and I don't know if there's anything to be taken from it, but I did notice that they don't cut to Jake very often in the non-performing scenes. So sort of in the in-between where they'll show the contestants backstage, that kind of thing, you don't tend to see Jake very much. Now, as with all these reality TV shows, it's entertainment first and foremost, and you'll have a team of writers and producers crafting a narrative from the footage that they're shooting, hence the cliffhanger last week. So in this scenario, you have your main characters, and there are already three or four performers who they come back to quite often. But it's also, I think, within that framework, a good idea to have that dark horse character, in the background of the story that you don't necessarily see coming up on the outside rail to challenge down the final stretch. So putting bias aside, my spidey senses tell me that Jake's going to go a long way in this competition, and I think that might be his role within the narrative that they're building. I don't know exactly why, but there was something about the way Lionel Richie said, "I like him," during his performance last week that was really definite and absolute. It wasn't sort of performative, and he wasn't saying, "I like this about him," or "I like that about him." I like him. In the audition, and then again in Hollywood Week last week, he really seemed taken with Jake's presence as well as his voice. And I think that when you have this guy who's played hundreds of live gigs and has miles under the tires, you don't need to spend a whole lot of time selling him. Now, like I say, I don't watch Idol, so this is just me speculating, but it feels like they're keeping Jake back in the mix a little bit so that when he does step out into that spotlight, the impact will be all the greater. The other thing I wanted to quickly address is the artwork for this season. I'm sure most of you will recognize that I'm taking the two characters from the cover of Highway Companion, or at least the conceptual characters, and dropping them into a story that will run through the songs this season. Manda Mosher, I'm not too sure of the pronunciation, on Facebook had asked where the art was coming from, so I figured I should talk about it. So I am a graphic designer, but I'm not a graphic artist. So I am using generative AI to visualize this journey that I conceived that the astronaut and the chimp are on through this road record. And I know that AI is problematic within the scope of the art. And believe me, I know that using it will come with some backlash, and I definitely have my thoughts on it as well. Lots of negative thoughts, but here's my rationale behind using it for this purpose. So first and most importantly, I don't generate any revenue from the Tom Petty Project. Outside maybe $4 or $5 a month that I make from t-shirt sales on TeePublic, this show actually cost me money. Doing this show cost me money. Not a lot of money, but I certainly can't afford to pay to work with a visual artist to create the images that fit the aesthetic framework of what I want to do with the episode art for this season. I'm not independently wealthy. I also can't draw. How I wish I could. I would also say that I'm not just asking ChatGPT to puke out any old image and then plastering that into the artwork and thinking, well, that'll do, that's good enough. I'd estimate that each one of the storyboard images that I've generated for this season has been around 3 to 4 hours work. The first thing that I did was create templates for the astronaut, the chimp, the car with side views, top views, head-on view, from the back, all that kind of stuff, so that I could ensure, as far as possible, that the AI would keep these things consistent through the run. The next part is I have sketched out this 12-panel story and mapped out all the elements I want to see so that I can hopefully have a cohesive narrative through the season. And I did this one months ago, long before I started recording the episodes. And actually, for next season, I had Mojo done, all the artwork done before I'd even finished Echo. Next season's art for Mojo is not AI generated, but it uses images taken from the documentary footage for Mojo. So I feel like I'm stepping very slightly on the toes of the estate by using that imagery and that footage, with credit, of course, in the album notes, or in the episode notes. But I find myself in this in-between land of wanting to respect intellectual property, but understanding all the concerns around using AI for the episode artwork too. So I genuinely love to hear your thoughts about this. I know there are ethical concerns about the use of AI in general, and I'm absolutely open to hearing your thoughts about this, whether, do we just ditch it and go on a different route for the rest of the season? Do we stick with it? Like I said, I've got all the artwork done already, so it's kind of a sunk cost in that regard, but let me know your thoughts on this, either on social media or via DM or email. Tell me what you think. As a last note, before we go to your comments, I managed to completely forget the polls again last week, so I put them up tonight. I'll read all 3 results on next week's episode. So, over on Facebook, Rebecca Foster Pitoniak, oh God, I don't know how I'm pronouncing these names these days, commented, "This song speaks to me. It's like I can't stand the struggles to succeed in my goals, but yet I can't stand to fail at my endeavours. I perceived that from this song. Tom knew and lived life. He speaks to us all." And I would say, Rebecca, that I don't think your struggle is uncommon in that, and just remember that any step you take on that path toward any goal is still a forward step. So don't trivialize that or think it anything other than that forward step. Nora Hayward-Olsen, who will be coming on the show again in the next few weeks, hopefully, we're going to try and schedule something for what promises to be a really interesting conversation, says, "I'm trying to figure out a way to put my thoughts on this song as succinctly as possible. It's challenging. Vulnerability, honesty, and redemption are the first words that come to mind. In short, it's the story of a repaired relationship, the hard work it takes to get there, and the feeling of satisfaction and relief once those repairs are made." Well, Nora, I think that is beautifully put. Now, I can't really help you with the succinct bit. I mean, I waffle on for 10 to 12 to 15 minutes about a single song every week, so if you want succinct, I'm sorry, but you're on your own there. Rich Gibson commented, "Love the song. There are songs I prefer on this album, so to differentiate, I'd probably say it's an 8 or a 9 out of 10, but just to differentiate. Love the fact he went with an early vocal take with the vibe and made it work technically. Great analysis as always, Kevin." So, hey, thanks as always, Rich. And I like that you hold those 10s back for special cases. I do sometimes wonder if I'm a little liberal with them, but man, look, if a song hits you, it just hits you, right? Dave Villardo, who I think may be commenting for the first time, writes, "One of his best, and it's lived its life pretty quietly. Glad to see some others here recognize its potency too." And I agree completely with this, Dave. It's one of those real hardcore fans only kind of deep cuts that sits sparkling in the bottom of the trunk but dazzles anyone you pull it out and show it to. Victoria Shaw reveals, "This song speaks to me also, and it's the first song I ever played at an open mic many years ago." And isn't that cool? I hope you're still playing, Victoria, and even more so that this song is still in your repertoire. Over on Instagram, Carleen Rowe left me a very detailed précis on this one, and she wrote, "What is there to mention about Square One that hasn't been said? While I can most certainly trace my original love of this song back to its use in Cameron Crowe's Elizabethtown, it has become the one, if asked, what is your favourite Tom Petty song, I would say Square One, with no hesitation. Although likely followed immediately with qualifiers like, but I don't think it's necessarily his best song. A few years ago, I dusted off an old Casio keyboard I got a lifetime ago as a Christmas gift, placed it on the floor where I often found myself sitting in moments of peace, and gave myself the opportunity to scratch the itch of playing music again. I've wanted to learn to play Square One on guitar for a while, but literally have held a guitar and tried to play maybe twice in my life. Simplicity at its best, Square One's chords were easy enough to work out, even with my basic music knowledge, on that once tucked away but never forgotten Casio. That frisson of electricity you get when playing along with a song coursed through me and lit up a lot of old familiar pathways. Hopefully someday I'll learn it on guitar. For now, I'll keep flushing out chords on the keys and playing air triangle, listening to those perfectly placed chimes, and remembering I'm happier when I play music. A world of trouble and tears has taken me a long time to get here. Is there a different score for your favourite ever TP song? Because this one is it for me." And I think I might have said this before, but I bet you at least 90% of Tom's catalogue falls into the "it's someone's favourite song" category. And I don't think that's super common amongst artists with a career the length of Tom's, but it just shows you how strong this guy's songwriting chops were. And Carleen, I'd definitely say that you should dust off that guitar and give this one a go. Head over to Judge Timber's YouTube channel if you need a jumping off point, because he breaks it down like all the songs he covers absolutely fabulously. To wrap things up, Lisa Kelly Pennington wasn't happy with me after episode 1 as she didn't guess my rating, but I think I've redeemed myself. She writes, "So the next 3 seasons will be a struggle. Got it, Kevin. I do love Square One and I think it's beautiful. Definitely one to listen to when I'm struggling and need to stop to take a breath. You did a much better job with the rating this week. 1 for 1. All right, well, that's enough social media. This bit's going to be a bit longer than the song breakdown at this rate, so let's get into it. This week, we're flirting with time. In Conversations with Tom Petty, author Paul Zollo remarks, "Flirting with Time has such a catchy chorus, almost like an old Motown hook." Tom responds, "It's almost too catchy, isn't it?" I played that for Jeff and I was kind of worried that he might say, "That's too catchy, it's too obvious." I was worried it was too light, but Jeff and Mike liked it. And I'm always fascinated by that self-doubt that all musicians have, especially the great ones. Has this path been trodden too many times? Am I taken from some place that I'm not aware of? Is it good enough? And even, is this too catchy? Is it too obvious? For me, that sense of self-awareness and that rigorous internal quality control is the hallmark of a real songwriter. That'll do should never be good enough. This song has one of the shortest intros in the Tom Petty catalogue, 1 bar. We start on D before dropping to E minor and eventually down to G. We have that distorted electric guitar that kicks us off with a simple tom fill bringing in the drums, and then the bass dropping into a very simple 2-note pulse on the root notes of each chord. Tom's vocal here is high but not strained. He's right at the very end of his comfortable natural range without really having to force himself into his raspier upper register or lean into his character-driven drawl. A coyote ran across the road on the move without a home. A flash of light reminded me of you. So right away we're being dropped into this little part of a world that Tom is creating for us, and again, right away I get real flashbacks to the Into the Great Wide Open album. I always think that sonically this is a not too distant cousin of Too Good to Be True, even thematically in some ways. It has that same dusty desert highway feel to it to me. It's also the first song on the album that really gets that pavement rolling under your wheels. As well as the electric guitar part, there's a strummed acoustic guitar part in there too, and it's so tightly mixed that I can't hear distinctly if there's more than those two, but given Jeff Lynne's involvement, I suspect that there would be 1 or 2 more parts in there, adding some of that trademark subtle texture. A third guitar part definitely does come in on the pre-chorus line. "I've done all I can do, now it's up to you," with that alternation between C and A minor. It's a really bright, vibrant tone, just ringing those changes before the turnaround into the chorus. "You're flirting with time," Tom sings, and I like that idea of not fully committing to time, just flirting with it. That's definitely how it feels when you're in your 20s and your 30s. You don't really have to enter into a serious relationship with time because there's still so much of it ahead of you. You can mess around on it, and you know it'll always be there when you get home. There's an implicit transience to that line that I just absolutely love. Of course, this laissez-faire attitude is quickly brought to heel in the second half of the chorus, flirting with time, but maybe time, baby, is catching up with you. And that's just a universal truth. Death and taxes, people. Those are the only 2 guarantees in this life. Well, and cheese. Unless you're lactose intolerant. Hey, look, I'm getting off topic here. I guess thinking about cheese now. I blame time, and cheese. Where was I? Right, when the chorus starts, ahead of the first beat of the bar, Tom's vocal is double-tracked, and then the harmonies come in on the word time. Now, for the first time really on a Tom Petty song, outside of I Don't Want to Fight, I'm pretty sure we hear Mike Campbell's voice in those backing vocals. And by that I mean you can hear them distinctly, I think. If you listen especially to the word baby, that sure as hell sounds like Mike singing that third part harmony to me. Obviously, Mike has a similar vocal twang to Tom and some similar characteristics in his voice, but there's a little more natural rasp to Mike's vocal. It's a little bit, there's a slight readiness to it, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but a slight readiness to it that Tom's voice doesn't have, unless he's really leaning into a character that has that kind of, that nasal, reedy kind of quality. Jeff Lynne's also there, but I'd be willing to bet Mike is singing backing vocals on this one. So again, tell me what you think of that in the comments when I post this one out on socials. The other thing that changes noticeably in the chorus is the kick snare pattern. The backbeat is replaced by a 4-on-the-floor snare with the kick drum syncopating and moving around it. That distorted electric guitar we heard in the pre-chorus is also present, strumming a very basic progression, and then the bass picks up the pace a little, playing some quarter notes and eighth notes in there to give movement to this section. And when you really think about it, there isn't really a riff in this song. All the melodic heavy lifting is done by the vocal. The song moves back to the next verse, and we realize that actually we had 2 verses before the first chorus and not a single one. The verse structure is 3 lines and then a 1-bar vocal pause. So, shadow men talk a real good game. Every punchline has your name. You cried out and no one came to you. Again, we have that tried and tested Petty convention here of switching the POV. Now we have an internal monologue or an observation rather than the vignette we were presented with in the first verse. The last line becomes active, but the first 2 lines are sort of like a little reflective interlude from our narrator. John Metzger, in his Music Box review of the album, suggested that the complaints that Petty sang about came across better on this album than on The Last DJ, which is an unusual way to think about this record, I think. And it's not, certainly I don't think of this as any sort of extension of the grievances Tom was talking about on Last DJ. And I suspect that one of the lines that John would have drawn this inference from is the first line of this verse. Shadow men talk a real good game. Here again, we have that, the ever mysterious lurkers behind the scenes controlling things, and being nefarious. But I don't think necessarily Tom's not jumping into that with both feet. Now, Tom would revisit this idea of shadow people in a very different context on the final Heartbreakers album. But again, here it feels to me more like a passing comment rather than a fixation or any sort of serious complaint. We move straight back into the pre-chorus and in an orderly fashion back into the chorus, both of which pass without any development of the arrangement or the instrumentation. From here, we move seamlessly into the instrumental break. It's not really a solo, as that metallic rubber band lead guitar tone twangs its way through an inversion of the vocal melody line over the verse chord progression until the very end, when we get arguably the strangest sonic moment in the entire Tom Petty canon. On the first beat of that last bar, we hear this very strange, synthetic-sounding bend or sweep down. So, I'm on level with you. I don't know exactly what that is. I think probably it's a synthesizer note being pitch bent down at the same time as that guitar plays that final note. I don't think it's a slide guitar. I mean, I guess it could be, put through a load of effects to give it that sort of very electronic feel. But whatever it is, it gives this section a really strange, otherworldly dynamic. And I can't help wonder if it's part of what prompted the imagery on the cover, which we'll also be talking about in depth on a later episode. All right, folks, it's time for your petty trivia for the week. Your question from last week was this. At its southernmost point, US 441 begins its life in Miami, Florida, but in which town does it terminate at its northernmost point? Is it A, Athens, Georgia, B, Franklin, North Carolina, C, Rocky Top, Tennessee, or D, Williamsburg, Kentucky? Well, let's have a little history lesson first. The US numbered highway system was created in 1926 to bring national standardization to what had previously been a patchwork of named auto trails and state-marked roads. The system was developed by the American Association of State Highway Officials. And I love this because their acronym is ASHO. You only need the L on there. If they were a limited company, they'd be an asshole. So I'm just saying. But in cooperation with the Bureau of Public Roads. On November 11th, 1926, ASHO, see, it's funny, approved the first national plan which introduced a grid-based numbering scheme. Even-numbered routes run east to west, while odd-numbered routes run north to south, with lower numbers generally in the north and east and higher numbers in the south and west. The inaugural system included several major transcontinental routes such as US Route 1, Maine to Florida, Route 30, New Jersey to Oregon, US Route 40, New Jersey to California, and of course, Route 66 from Chicago to Los Angeles. As the network expanded and traffic patterns evolved, new highways and extensions were periodically added. One such addition was US Route 441, which entered the system in 1941 as a spur route of US 41. The highway was designated to provide a north-south corridor through the southeastern United States linking Miami with the Great Smoky Mountains region of Tennessee. On its way, it would pass through cities such as Orlando, Gainesville, of course, and Knoxville. And like many three-digit US highways, its numbering reflects its origin as a branch of a primary route, of course, US 41, as we said, and it became an important regional connector. So, US 441 terminates at its northernmost point in Rocky Top, Tennessee. What a great name for a town. Your question for this week is this. As we're flirting with time, I thought I might ask you about the world's oldest working mechanical clock. Residing in Salisbury Cathedral in England, this faceless clock, which rang out the hour, is thought to date from which year? Is it A, 1386, B, 1410, C, 1843, or D, 1859? Okay, back to the song. I mentioned before the lyrical structure, and there are 2 or 3 different ways you could envisage ending this song or writing this last verse, but Tom leaves us with a last verse reminiscent, to me anyway, of the final act of Crawling Back to You. He moves away from the commentary and the characters that he set up in the previous verses by leaving us with a little bit of wisdom. Should be more to learn from this. Can't say I know what it is. No difference between a hit or miss, it's true. And I can't help but feel that this is Tom moving on from the ire of the last DJ and accepting that you simply can't predict the future or control it, nor should you want to. In that river of time, you're going to be buffeted by the waves, drawn by the currents, no matter which way you think you want to paddle or steer. I also think that line, no difference between a hit or miss, is a really rich philosophical idea. And I know that might sound a little like junk psychology, and I'll apologize to my pal Nick Apostolaris for that right now. But that idea it's always been fascinating to me, and to be perfectly honest, it's what drives me creatively. I've never tried to create the most successful podcast on the planet, or to write the best song that's ever been written. You know, I love the creative spark, and I love the process of the creating for its own sake. I love it as much as, or often more than, the outcome. Hit or miss, there's always more to learn from any endeavor, and it's that which is nourishing to the creative brain and the creative soul, in my experience. And Tom just drops that little observation into the last verse of an album track kind of buried on a solo record toward the end of his career. To end the song, we get 2 repetitions of the chorus with a couple of simple drum fills, first on the toms and then on the snare, and then there's also an organ added to this section just to give us a little kick at the end of the track. The last chorus fades out as Tom vamps a little vocally, and the song drifts away as time has a habit of doing. In conversations with Tom Petty, Tom tells Paul Zollo, "I'm still not dead sure what the song's about. I just followed my nose until the end of it. It's on that theme of realizing that time is precious, and you've really got to use it every day. It's not a song I would have written as a kid. It's like a little letter to myself to remember to do that." And sometimes those are the best songs, when you have an idea that you can't quite grasp fully, but you let the idea percolate just to see what happens. Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. This is a really nice little 5-chord song. It's melodic, it's almost too catchy, to use Tom's words, and it contains some thoughtful, attractive lyrical themes in it, as well as that wonderful Petty imagery that's peppered throughout. I didn't give anything from the last DJ a rating lower than an 8, but for all its appeal, and for as much as I love it, this one's a very simple, dependable album track. I don't think it's a song I'd ever give to anyone as an example of Tom's finest work, and so I find I can't bring it up to an 8 out of 10. If I were using half marks, I'd be tempted to go with a 6.5 for this one, but as it is, I'm going to say that Flirting with Time, on the strength of the lyric alone, is a solid 7 out of 10. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Boneless Podcasting Network, which is a loose collective of podcasting friends and acquaintances brought together and championed by the inimitable Chaz Charles. Go check out the roster by clicking on the link in the episode notes. That's bonelesspodcasting.com. You can also check out my other podcast, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I co-host with my very, very best friend, Randy Woods. And you can also check out the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I co-host with my other very good friend, Corey Morissette. We're covering Blondie's first 4 albums on this season, and we've just finished the first album. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, subscribe as applicable, and do all the things like leaving a review and a rating, all that kind of stuff. Keep talking to me on social media, and I'll keep reading out as many of your comments as I can on the show. And as a weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way. So, when you're looking for Tom's music, go to official streaming platforms, or better yet, go to your local independent record store, buy some physical media, and keep local businesses running. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to store.tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merch for this show, to give me that $2 or $3 a month, please go to store.tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook, and make sure you check out Tom Petty Radio on Channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week when we'll be packing up the El Dorado and heading down south. Bye-bye.